Kirsten was talking about time. Wait a minute. Something is missing here. The prayer, right? What a beautiful topic. And giving continuation to this book, Times of Health and Conscientiousness. Before we start and we pray, Chris, can you come and read for us, please?
Everyone, okay. Accept people just as they appear to you. This arrogant man that you do not like is sick, and you may not know it, or he may not know it. Sorry. This recalcitrant gentleman is unhappy within himself. That demeaning acquaintance has nerve problems. Some who appear proud are merely suffering from conflicts that they try to hide. Others, who appear to be indifferent, are experiencing terrible fears. The earth is a great hospital of souls. The person who sees you just superficially has no way of analyzing you correctly. Let everyone be what they are and not what you want them to be.
Great message, right? As we come together again, full force in accepting one another, welcoming one another as we are. We would like then to invite everyone to pray together, asking our dear Mother, Father God, to guide us all throughout this meeting, this moment that we have stopped, asking that you lead us into greatness, to revisit some of the reminders that we're about to receive and bring them to heart, to learn new things and do the same as we ask that we are also guided to project ourselves onto others with kindness, love, so we can teach them as well with our good actions, our good deeds, transforming ourselves and transforming others through love. We ask you, dear Lord, that this moment also bring light to both realms of life, those who cannot be here with us, those who are on war, battling with themselves, not understanding the environment, perhaps not loving others as they are, as Joanna de Angelis has reminded us, and causing more trouble instead of being accepting, kind, and love. This way, dear Lord, we ask that this may be a point of light to each one of us, now and in the future, and so be it. And as we were saying, coming back together again, physically here at the SSB, Kirsten will be talking about the resource of prayer from a beautiful chapter from this book, Times of Health and Conscientiousness by Joanna de Angelis. Kirsten, please.
Hello? Good? All right. Good afternoon? Yes, it's not 6 o'clock, right? So it's no? Evening? Afternoon, evening. Okay. I'm bad at this stuff. Oh, and I'm so sorry. There's a little my producer did not catch this error. I'll have to talk to him later. Times of Health and Conscientiousness. We've been talking about this book now. We've been doing our talks now for quite a number of weeks. We're on chapter 13. It's a phenomenal book. Yes, we are biased personally to Joanna's work, her works, her literature, which I'm trying to find here. We have a couple books over there, but usually most, if not all, of the books that she has written, psychographed through the medium Divaldo Franco, largely come from this psychological perspective. And most of us already know that. She always approaches everything from a philosophical, psychological perspective. We always call her this brilliant psychologist because she really helps us to dive in to understand things on a profound level. We're going to be talking about a topic today that most of you already know what it is: prayer? Does everybody know what prayer is? Right, everybody knows, right? You have some understanding of concept of what prayer is, and why it's important. And in recent years, and I'm going to talk about this here in my talk today, there's a good number of research that's been published to show the benefits and, well, all sides of prayer, from something called, oh my gosh, I'm completely forgetting now. I'm going to name it here on the slide in a second, but it's that habitual prayer that sometimes some religions use, just a repetitive type of prayer. You know, there's research done on that and how it affects the brain, versus people that do more of a type of prayer that's just sort of spontaneous or ad lib, if you will. So we're going to talk a little bit about that as well. And of course, interweaving all of that into what Joanna and what Spiritism brings to us. But true to this book and how Joanna has laid out each chapter, she starts each chapter with a set of affirmations. And we always like to stop to take this moment to do these affirmations together. Now, I totally encourage you, if you want to close your eyes, if you're comfortable. If not, that's okay. You can just look at the screen as I'm reading and sort of sit with it. So I'm going to read it, and I want you to sit with it. What does that mean? So I'm going to say these words that Joanna has in this book, and I want you to feel how it makes you feel. I want you to just be aware of how you feel it in your body, in your heart, and where you feel it. It starts out like this. Actually, let me stop. 1 second. Oh. No, it's there. Okay, sorry. I digress. The divine source of energy is reached through prayer. The divine source of energy is reached through prayer. I enter its core while I pray, and I am reinvigorated by the forces that invade me. I enter its core while I pray, and I am reinvigorated by the forces that invade me. The higher energies restore my balance, and my vital field is recomposed, sustaining my being. I pray and lift myself to God, thus hovering, though briefly, above human misery. So let us just take this moment just to think about these words. I pray and lift myself to God, thus hovering, though briefly, above human misery. I just want us to be present with these words. And what does prayer mean to us? What does prayer look like to us? How do we pray? Is there a right way to pray? Is there a wrong way to pray? Well, before we dive into all that, let's talk about what exists out there in the field of the research field. The research that has been done, which is there's a good amount of research that has been done on prayer. The good, the bad, and the ugly. It has given us enough information to understand a lot of different concepts. So the one in this particular research, this data that you can find on pewresearch.org, this was specifically to do with the frequency of prayer. And they found that, and I'm just going to quote the actual text here, that for many Americans, every day is a day of prayer. And then more than 55% of Americans say that they pray every day. And this is just according to a 2014 research. They're actually, and I ended up finding a more recent research that was done on this, and there's even a larger amount of people post-pandemic or since the pandemic that the amount of prayers have increased. And this is just data that was obtained by asking, a large sample of people. This particular sample size was 35,000. And they found in this study that even among those who were religiously unaffiliated, 20% said that they prayed daily. Women, 64%, were more likely than men, 46% to pray every day. And Americans aged 65 and older are more likely to pray than adults under 30 to say they pray, 65 versus 41%. So there's just interesting data that's out there. And this was a paper that was published in 2010. It was entitled Prayer and Subjective Well-Being, an examination of 6 different types of prayer. And this is a really interesting study that was done. And we're just bringing the results of this study. And we're going to read it and talk about it. But the results of this study highlighted the complexity of prayer, the multidimensional nature of religion. Quote, our data suggests that these different prayer types have different effects on psychological well-being. These differences in well-being appear to be driven by differences in the meaning that praying individuals give to their relationship with God. We have suggested that the prayer types which had positive effects on well-being are distinguished by their egoless nature, whereas the prayer types that had negative effects were more ego-focused. And this was done, the survey sample was about 430 people, and they basically were recruited online. They completed a measure of 6 different prayer types. And here we have listed them: adoration, confession, thanksgiving, supplication, reception, and obligatory prayer. So why is this? And this is just this particular study, 75% of the participants were in the United States, or US natives rather, I should say. The other 25% were a mix from Middle East, North Africa, Europe, Asia, Scandinavia, Australia, Canada, Africa, and Central and South America, and the Caribbean. Just to give us an idea, because this is not, it's more so we could say accurate of the American population. But why is it significant? Like, why do I even need to know that if there are different types of prayer? Well, for the sake of this scientific research, they wanted to define it. Why is that? Well, they found in another research that just random individuals that just randomly pray, they found that it didn't have much of an effect. So specifically, there was a study done on post-operative patients that had just had a heart surgery. So they did a study for a large sample size of people that were praying for the patients that were had just had the surgery, and they followed the health of that sample size of patients, and they had a large sample size of patients that were not being prayed for. And they found that there wasn't a whole lot of a difference in how they fared. So then that prompted more curiosity. Like, okay, well, but people say prayer works. People say they feel better. So a much more, we would say, specific, such as this, studies have been done. So they knew that people were getting benefits because there were other types of studies that were out there. They were finding some positives. So they wanted to look more specifically, like, okay, so some people are having a good experience. So maybe it's the way in which they're approaching it. So adoration versus a confessional prayer where you're praying to God and you're just telling God all of the bad things that you've done. Or you're saying a prayer of thanksgiving where you're just thanking God for all of your blessings. So they've noticed that when people specifically did each different category of this prayer, they had a different result. Specifically with adoration, thanksgiving, supplication, which was kind of deemed as an egoless kind of prayer where you weren't thinking just about yourself. You were thinking about God and the general whole of humanity. Whereas, confessional, supplication, and other ones here was more so talking about ourselves. Now, this is just research that came out in Science. This is one of hundreds of papers that are out there that we can read. But it's just interesting from a Spiritist perspective because we know that it's all about our intention. It's never about the words that we're saying. Now, there's an interesting thing about that because we know that in the research, people that are doing what's called obligatory prayers. So for instance, certain religions that have specific prayers that they have to recite 3 times a day, or other religions that they have specific, like Catholics, they have the rosary. Now, the interesting research that's out there is that they found that people that just mindlessly repeat those words don't necessarily have any type of positive effect on them, on their brain. However, the people who did those prayers, who expressed a sincere connection to their creator, did have a positive response. So it really all depended upon what that person was doing. So they had even the study that was, they specifically asked people to recite the rosary while thinking about somebody they hated. And they would do CAT scans and MRIs of their brain. And so it was not good, as you can imagine. So words alone, it doesn't suffice. So something interesting. If you're ever, I want to say if you're ever bored one day, but if you ever get curious, Google it. There's so much information, the scholarly articles that's out there that really can make you curious. But as we were doing and preparing for this talk, I was reminded of this, I think it was in the 90s, if you guys remember. I don't know if any of you are country music fans, but Garth Brooks, who used to be really famous, I guess maybe he is, but he's just, not really so much. He had this song out, and I think it was called Unanswered Prayers, and forgive me, I don't know the name of the song, but the words of this song have always kind of been in the back of my mind, because there's one hook. My daughter's not here in this audience, she's in the other room. She would remind me of what it's called in musical terms, because I can't recall. But in the song, he says, some of God's greatest gifts are unanswered prayers. So like in the story, true to most country music songs, it's a love song where he loved this girl, and then he, prayed so much to God for God to make them get back together, and God never answers his prayer, and he's really sad. But by the end of the song, he's already grown up and he meets somebody else who he realizes is really the love of his life. And then he's so grateful to God that he didn't answer his prayers when he was younger. So some of God's greatest gifts are unanswered prayers. But this is what it is, though. This is a common issue, a common challenge that all of us face. And it's a common question that we get, that, like, hey, I'm praying, but I'm not seeing a result. Or, hey, I'm praying, I don't feel any different. So, why is that? Why is that? Why might that be? So in the Medium's book, part 2, chapter 14, XIV, yes? Leo? Yes? Okay, glad. Leo, you're sleeping on me, man. Chapter 14, I'm terrible with Roman numerals. There's a question that's asked. Can healing be affected through prayer alone? And the good spirits answer, yes. Sometimes God allows this. However, it is sometimes for sick persons' own good to continue to suffer, and they think their prayers have not been heard. At first glance, you might think, well, wow, God's cruel. We just have to suffer through it. Well, let's use an analogy. Okay, think about children. Think about when, for instance, like a 3 or 4-year-old who refuses to eat his dinner. And if you could, such like an example of my own son, if we would allow him, he would eat Oreos for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. I don't know where he gets that from, not from me, but the problem with that is that there's no nutritional value in an Oreo. There's none. Okay, so being the good parent that I am, or that we are, I hope, we say, no, you don't get to have it. And of course, he throws a tantrum, and this happens on a daily basis. So he's going through a suffering. And when we're trying to rear our children, it's the same thing. They want what they want, but here we are, much like God saying, listen, in the long run, this is not going to be good for you. So that's kind of analogous to our own lives. Like in the moment when we're going through the suffering, we want things to be changed. We want them a certain way. But generally speaking, as someone who is older now, looking back on my younger years, I can attest to this, that there were times where we think like, we pray for something and we're like waiting for God to bring it to us or answer it or change the situation. But now we look back and realize that that was the best experience for us to go through those things. But it's always hard in the moment to understand and to grasp that. So if we ever find ourselves in a predicament where we are praying, and we're praying honestly, we're praying genuinely from our hearts, from our souls, but we find ourselves saying, well, I don't see anything changing, just wait. Maybe what's happening is meant for us to get curious about ourselves and how we feel about that situation and what it's supposed to teach us. So we can try to run away, and people do throughout humanity. We can run away because we don't want to deal with something, but doesn't matter where we run to, whatever we are meant to learn, we're going to learn it. It might not be under the same circumstances with the same people, but we cannot run away from ourselves. We can't. So trying to make the best of it as is and not being fearful. So, and I heard something recently and I really liked it. And it is about that people that are tired of life or people that choose to end their life, it's not that they're scared of, or it's not that they're cowards or that they're bad people or that they're obviously not scared to die, but it's more so their issue is they're scared to live. They're afraid of the feelings they're going to feel if they were to live and continue living that way. But if we could change that perspective, if we could help one another to say, well, we can acknowledge that there are parts of us that become afraid, that are afraid to feel pain. But what if instead of that, we got curious about our own pain and ask ourselves, well, why am I feeling this way? What are the lessons that I can learn from these parts of myself? Joanna begins this chapter reminding us that prayer is a tool. It is a tool in our toolbox we should always utilize. It's always there for us. It's like this, and we talked about this before. I know it, and you all might be thinking, oh my gosh, you're talking about prayer again. This is so redundant. It's always something to learn. There's always something new to learn, especially when it comes to Joanna and the words that she brings to us. And she says, prayer is the most accessible, magnificent resource there is for enabling individuals to communicate with the Creator. It's free. You don't need to have a VPN. You can access it anywhere. It's like this free Wi-Fi that just exists all over the globe for anyone and everybody. An invisible bridge of subtle energies. It promotes the union of the soul with the divine genitor, from whom it draws forces and inspiration for the difficult commitments of existence. Prayer does not change the battlefield, nor does it prevent the trials that foster evolution. However, it does provide endurance for the struggle and is ever encouraging and vitalizing. I know I believe I shared this story before, but it's such a moving story to me that I always like to share it. It was a old coworker of mine, and she had 3 children, 3 beautiful children, and she ended up, needing to. She wanted to be home. She wanted to be home more often with the kids, and be more of a stay-at-home mom. So she stopped working as a nurse and became full-time, stay-at-home mom. And her husband had a really good paying job. So we kept in touch through the years. And so last year, give or take, I was texting her and I was like, oh, she's really not texting me back. So finally I texted her. I was like, hey, I just really reach out to you, make sure you're doing okay, make sure the kids are okay, husband's okay. So finally, like, it was late at night, like 11 o'clock at night, she texted me back and she's like, listen, Kirsten, I'm so sorry. The last few months I've not texted you or called you back. She's like, if I'm being quite honest, it's because my oldest was just diagnosed last summer, or at that time, I think it was a couple months after the summer, was diagnosed with this extremely rare form of incurable cancer. And she'd been sick for a while and they couldn't figure out what it was. And finally they found it was this extremely like 1 in a million kind of cancer. And her daughter's like 8 years old. So, and she's like, I'm trying to come to terms with that. And I've only recently come to terms with it. And so I was like, oh my gosh, I didn't know what to say. But she's like, no, but I'm okay. I was like, how can you be okay? Are you sure? So she's like, Kirsten, let me tell you this experience I had. And it was, I could feel through the phone, like goosebumps throughout my entire body when she's telling me this. And I probably should have mentioned that she's Catholic, but she wasn't like a super religious Catholic person. She had her kids get baptized and all those kind of things. But she said, Kirsten, one day I was, recently when we were talking, she said, I was sitting at Johns Hopkins and we were waiting for the final test to come back to find out everything. So the doctor comes in the room and tells me and my husband the news, and we're just kind of like in shock. We don't even like say anything. My husband goes home, take care of the other 2 little kids, and I'm in there by myself, and I'm sitting there in the dark with my daughter because she fell asleep. And she's like, something came over me, and she just said that I got on my hands and knees next to my daughter's bed, and I just said, God, I can't do this. I can't do this if you don't help me. Like, I can't sit here and watch my daughter die before my eyes. Like, I can't. Like, you have to help me do something, please. Like, whatever is your plan. So she said that she proceeded to just talk to God and like cry kind of quietly because she didn't want to wake her daughter. So she said, Kirsten, I don't know how long I prayed for, but I prayed. And she said, close to the end of my prayer, she said, I swear to you, I felt as if Jesus himself had knelt down beside me and embraced me and told me, you're not alone. You're not alone. And she said, after that, she said, I feel I'm at peace. Like I'm at peace, And she's like, it might seem unbelievable. Maybe that's crazy. And I'm like, no, it's not crazy at all. But she said to me, Kirsten, as horrible as this experience is, and I would never wish it on my worst enemy, I never would have came to the faith that I have now, and never would have came to the understanding I have now had I not gone through this with my daughter. She's like, I don't know what opportunity would have produced this within me to cry out to God and to connect with him. I mean, only our children, right? As a mother, producing that inside of us to provoke that emotion within us. So, and she just had explained to me and continues to say that prayer is a tool in her toolbox that she utilizes daily, not just for herself, but for her children, for her husband. And she has so much peace in it. So I'm sharing this story because she's just an average human being who's going through a very, I don't even think that there are words to describe what it's like to watch your firstborn child go through chemo and radiation and to, wither away to skin and bones before your eyes. But through prayer, all things are possible. And so it's not surprising that Google put out a report that during the first 3 months of 2020, that the Google searches for prayer skyrocketed. So every now and again, you'll see Google putting out, what are the different trends of what people are searching. But right around this time, this is when the biggest surge had happened and continues to be high. People searching for things like prayers for people who have COVID-19. Yes, we have received, Daniel's just reminding us in the back that we also have received through the SSB website prayers for people who've had COVID and gone through it. Yeah. And it just goes to show you that it is something on all of humanity's mind. And remember, most places, with the exception of a few countries, have access to Google. But Joanna goes on, and we want to talk about this. In regards to prayer, she says, it strengthens the enthusiasm of those who use it and broadens their view of reality. It modifies their understanding in the way they tackle events, producing attunement to the divine thought which governs everything. I'm going to stop there for a second. And I want to poll the audience real quick. And I want you all to think about a moment, a time, an experience where you felt that the moment was, or moments were challenging. Okay, do you guys all understand? I want you to think about a moment in your life, past, present, that has been really difficult. And I want you to think about, and this is just a rhetorical question, it's a question you ask yourself. I want you to think about, during those difficult moments, did I pray? And if I prayed, how did I feel after I prayed? And if every time you prayed, did you have these feelings? Did you feel strength? Did it modify your understanding? I just want you to think about it. And if the answer is no, that's okay. As a matter of fact, for those of you who are saying to yourself, no, thank you for being honest with yourself. Because the reality is, every single time we go to pray, we might not automatically feel this. And this goes back to the research we talked about when we first started. Because sometimes when we are in the midst of the trial or tribulation or the challenge, and we go to pray, it's like we have a block. It feels really difficult. But also, actually, what's happening is that because I'm so wrapped up in that experience that's really troublesome for me, I'm unable to tune into these positive vibrations. But that doesn't mean that our guardian angels, our mentors or guides are not there. As a matter of fact, they are. And what happens often is that since they can't reach us, they often use people around us to reach us. So recently at our study group, Gioni had shared this story. Hi, Gioni. I'm going to share your story. A story that a number of years ago, I think, happened to her. She went to the beach, and I'm probably going to mix up some of the details here, but I'll get the purpose out, or the point of the story. And she met a person who, and they, anyone that knows Gioni knows she's very gregarious. She's very friendly, very easy to get along with. Yeah. So she's a very warm person. So she always extends that out to other people. So as you can imagine, Gioni on a beach, seeing other people, of course she'd spark up conversations with other people and really make them feel like they're welcome. And like, it's as if like you're her best friend in like 2.5 seconds. It's a really great feeling, and not everyone has that capability. So this was imparted to this random stranger who, let's just say, they became friends. And many years later, she told Gioni, "Do you know that day that I met you on the beach? I went there because I had made the decision to kill myself. I had made my peace with it and said, I'm going to go to the beach and just take my life. Just walk out, you know, and end it all. But here comes Dione, crosses her path. This is a prime example of when our guardian angels, you can say our guardian angels, you can say God, you could say our mentors, whatever it is, this divine intervention that God uses those at any moment around us, the most randomest of people, to help us to see the brighter parts of life. So, I digress. If we find ourselves praying and we don't feel immediate response or an answer or a change, just acknowledge that that's okay. Maybe you're not in the headspace to feel it yet. And just to be patient. And maybe the lesson is in waiting. I remember a very, very dear friend of mine was diagnosed with an incurable illness. And one of the first things I remember the conversation that I had with her, and she's a very spiritual person, and she said, I just want to do everything to like heal myself, change my diet, yoga, meditation, prayers, go to mass, go to the Buddhist temple and do all these array of things and do all these threw herself into everything and anything that was alternative. And she also did regular medicine. Then after a year of doing this, she was no better. And that just added to her frustration. And what could we say? She was doing everything. What else can you say? But hang in there. Keep going. Keep going. And I think it's been a few years with her already, where only now she's reached remission. And it's amazing because, much like the story I told earlier, she turned to me one day and said, Kirsten, remember how I was that first year? Really just desperate. I just wanted to get a cure. I just want to, she said that I know that I developed this because there was something in my karma or my past life or something that I'm supposed to learn in all this. But she said, I just wanted to get it over with. All right, God, just let me learn the lesson, move on already. But she said that I learned that, that I needed to calm down, just trust the process. And she said, the moment that I began to accept this illness, not in an acceptance okay, I'm going to die, or okay, this is just my life now, but in acceptance okay, let me try to manage this the best I can and do my best. And she said, for some reason, once I began to have that acceptance, I began to find so much peace, and that's when the remission came. Almost as if to tell me that in and of itself was a divine lesson for her. Just something for us to think about. Because we often see people like Gandhi, Mother Teresa, the Spiritist Brazilian medium Divaldo Franco, Chico Xavier, all these wonderful, great people, and we see them at their apex. We see them when they're doing these great things. But what nobody ever talks about is what it took to get there. And if you've ever seen the, I think it was the biography, the documentary done about Divaldo Franco's life, you kind of get a sneak peek to what, and Chico Xavier for that matter too, the terrible things that they experienced. But you don't become a Mother Teresa. You don't become a Martin Luther King, who, by the way, wasn't perfect, but he did great things. You don't become that without doing a ton of work on yourself. So it's important for us to acknowledge that, because we may read this, and I don't want us to be disillusioned or feel bad about ourselves. Because there's this idea that I really like, that all parts of us, that no parts of us are bad. Just want us to sit with that. We're going to go on. Joanna says, those who pray overcome tensions and are filled with peace. Prayer creates the conditions and circumstances for meditation, which projects the psyche toward the higher spheres, thus balancing one's health and aspirations for a better grasp of the meaning of the physical existence and one's reincarnation. Prayer prepares the saint, sustains the hero, inspires the researcher, and maintains life, while projecting light onto dark, threatening landscapes. So even when we don't realize it, prayer is helping us. She goes on to say the following: no matter how whole you may feel, no matter how whole we may feel, do not get out of the habit of prayer so that you may remain balanced. It's very easy when things are going great in our lives. We kind of like, I stop going to the center and I'm not praying as much, or I'm not acknowledging God's existence. I'm just about my business. And then things start to go bad. And then I'm like, oh no, God, where are you? But my mother used to always say, God never forgets our address. We forget his. So even in all the happy moments, we should remember to utilize prayer. When you go through difficulties or face harsh trials and expiations, resort to prayer, and you will notice the benefits that accrue. And that's an important word, accrue. Now I'm going to ask my producer in the back to turn on the AC real quick. Because this is a difficulty that we're going through. So I'm resorting to prayer in my mind that you could, thank you. But this word accrue is very significant. Because remember how we talked about sometimes we don't find, or we can't see the changes happen. But to accrue means to accumulate. So has anyone ever heard of like brownie points? So when we accrue brownie points with someone. So imagine that, but in the context of prayer. The more and more we pray, we are accruing the benefits. That one day we'll be open enough, well enough, balanced enough, connected enough to see these changes. Because often we think much like my friend whose daughter has cancer, we're praying for the child to get cured. Well, God's not curing my child, well, then there's no God. But instead, her thought process has been, I've prayed, I accept, and I'm trying to learn through the situation and do my best. Because sometimes we think it's the exterior that needs to change, when in reality, it's the interior of us. Joanna goes on to remind us that prayer is the most effective, long-lasting, readily available device for maintaining your enthusiasm and preserving your ideal. It will not only preserve your moral and spiritual forces, but will also attract the good spirits who act as God's instruments for solving many human problems. We know that when we tune our minds to higher vibrations, we live in a world of energy and vibrations. Science has already attested to this. Waves, vibrations, energies. So it's all about attunement, kind of like a radio frequency. Back in the olden days, before things like Apple Music, you had to have that little AM, FM dial. You had to find that sweet spot sometimes. You're trying to reach, you young kids won't know anything about this. But I can recall a time when we had to me and my siblings were like, okay, no, turn a little bit to the left. Go, okay, it's there. Oh, yes, song is on. Even times we used to have to nowadays you can just get music off of Apple Music. But in the olden days, we'd have to put a cassette player in the stereo system and then record it. I know, it's blow your mind, right? So we're saying all this because that fluctuation, that's us trying to find attunement. So we either can tune ourselves into something really negative or something really positive. It's a decision, although sometimes it doesn't feel like it's a decision because our emotions sometimes are so strong that it doesn't feel like our feelings are decisions. They just are what they are. But the more we begin to observe ourselves and get curious about our own inner selves, we really begin to understand who we are, how we operate, and how much peace we can find. And Joanna says to always pray. Now, does this mean that we have to walk around like a monk? No. She says the following, and once again, I'm so sorry. I just want to fix this. She says that be constant in prayer, using its invaluable action, which will maintain you mentally in an unchanging, lofty climate. This can look like different things. Being in constant prayer could mean something to the effect of, as you're walking to your car when you're leaving your work, Lord, just guide me on my way home. Or you're going to visit a friend. God, just help me be your vessel. Help me just to be kind and loving as I walk into my friend's house. It could just be an ongoing conversation. You don't necessarily have to sit and kneel. I have a very good friend of mine who's very near and dear to my heart. And one day, her and I got into this conversation, and she said to me, like a matter of factly, like, oh, Kirsten, like when you pray, like you get on your hands and knees, like you get on your knees, right? Like, and you pray to God. And I was just like, no, I don't. She's like, oh, but you have to. You have to do that. Like, it's reverence. So we end up having this conversation, not a very nice, open conversation about it. And then she said, well, I just always thought that you had to. Wasn't anything anyone ever told her. It's just something that she felt within herself. I said, if you feel that way, that's okay. That's totally fine. I don't feel the need to get on my knees. Not at my age anymore. So maybe, so it doesn't matter how you do it. What matters is what's in our heart. But being in this constant conversation with God allows us to be connected, as we kind of can see in this picture here. And this soul is just in this constant connection. Those who pray become renewed and enlightened, for it kindles an inner light that shines outward through special vibrations. When you actually experience the well-being and joy that derive from prayer, you will use it more frequently and make it your language of communication with the ardent life. And so this is why some people stop praying, because they're not feeling it. They don't feel the connection. They don't see the changes that they want. We become sort of like rebellious children or teenagers, not getting what we want, so I'm not going to acknowledge God. And guess what? It's not an ideal state to be in, but that's okay. Lucky for us, God still loves us, even through all that. And we should still love ourselves if we find ourselves in that position. If we find ourselves questioning why this is happening, it's okay to be curious. But let us remember, though, that much like a loving father or mother, even though our parents are far from perfect, it's a very, I would say, crude analogy at best to model the love that God has for us. But like a parent that has the love towards their children, God always loves us. So if we are unhappy with the results we are getting from our prayers, let us have faith and let us ask what we can learn from the experience. Because ultimately prayer, remember, it accrues over time. It lessens what ails us. Joanna says, when we pray enveloped in its radiations, you will dilute every ill that comes near, aiding the bad people that come your way. You will derive such comfort from prayer that it will be your constant companion, making your very existence a state of prayer. This is if we remain faithful. Because sometimes we lose faith, or we can't see the good because we have tunnel vision on the hardships that we're going through. But if we can just continue to pray and build our faith and get curious about the emotions, the feelings, the parts of us that are coming up during this time, like, why do I feel this way? Because they tell us that in the Spirit's book, know thyself. It's an imperative thing that we need all to do. And this is one of the ways we do it, to get curious about our own selves instead of being so judgmental of our own selves. Like, oh man, I shouldn't feel that way. I'm a Spiritist or I'm a Christian. Gosh, I can't say that about that person. Well, you did, and you do feel that way. So let's acknowledge it. Because Joanna has told us repressing and denying does nothing. It's just going to come right back up. It's going to bubble up to the surface. That's why loving ourselves, that's the commandment. Love thyself, love thy neighbor. We'll be able to achieve and to connect to this line of thinking. We'll be able to connect into prayer. And Joanna finishes out this chapter by giving us some final thoughts. And she says the following: resort to prayer at every moment of your life. That means the good, the bad, the in-between. In sickness and in health, in joy and in sorrow, in wealth and in poverty, in success and in failure, pray and trust the divine answer. By praying, you will draw near the higher realms, and in the energy of prayer, you will receive all you need to press on to victory. Individuals seek God through prayer, and God responds through intuition about what to do and how to do it. And in doing so, they are happy. And in the Spirit's book, there's a question that the spirits tell us that when we pray, it's like a spiritual CPR, because through prayer we are given courage, resignation, and who remembers what the P is? Courage, patience, and resignation. All three things that make a great mixture to help us deal with the troubling situations that this life can bring us. Now, I did want to take just a moment, because we are coming to a close now, and I wanted to open up the floor. But before I do that, hold on a second. Let me go back. I want you to think about a time in your life where you prayed, which might have been a good amount of times. Think about a time where you prayed, and whatever happened as a consequence of your prayer or prayers, you learned something or you had this insight. I just wanted to open it, and I know people are really shy, and that's okay. But has anyone had an experience where they prayed, or they did a number of prayers, and then they felt inspiration? I'm like, I want to go and I'm going to go do this. And then it turns out that was really good for you to do. Or did you ever have anyone pray for you, like your mother, or your friend, coworker, whatever? and then you got inspiration or an insight or a thought came to you. Gianni.
So I had to laugh with my friend because I was working and I had a problem. And I said, and I'm going to say her name because there are many with this name. So I said, Andrea, I'm here at my lunch and I need you to pray. She's in Wisconsin. I said, I need you to pray for me. The things are horrible. You need to pray for me. Please pray for me. I left a message. Then later on, I saw that she got my message, said, no worries, I'm going to pray for you. And I said, okay. And I go on working and working, and no kidding, people, you're going to laugh. You're going to think I'm making a joke or something. I felt such a well-being, such a hope and a faith that I was going to resolve that all. And I would feel like somebody was fanning me. And I said, my God, is the air conditioner? No, this is not air conditioner. It's like somebody was giving me a pass, some passes were working on me. And I started to laugh, and everybody said, are you okay, Johnny? Are you okay? I said, oh, yes, I had good news. Because, when we look at me, what's going on with her? Because all of a sudden, it was so intense that, it was like I lifted from the chair. And then later on, I go home. She said, so how was it? Are you okay? Are you feeling better? I said, if I tell you, you're going to think I'm joking. I'm not joking, but you did a lot for me today. She said, no, you're joking with me. I said, no, you did. I'm feeling so, I'm very convinced that I'm going to resolve this. And I was, but I was really in need of that prayer. And she was laughing. I said, next time I pray, don't doubt that your prayer is good, because it is.
Anybody else? Alba.
Thank you, Kirsten, for bringing the insights of Joanna. Are always good. I'm going to give an example when the answer to your prayer is no. Sometimes it's an answer. Sometimes it's no, my dear, not this time. No, the Oreo cookie, isn't it? For about 5 years, I was seeking for a different job, a different position for so many reasons. And every time I applied for one of these jobs, the answer was no. I applied for about 6 different of them, went through the interviews, got to the final rounds, and every time when I thought I got it, the answer was no. I was, God, what is it? You know what? As our dear friend and Paula said, what's the lesson here? Later on, I got to know that some of the positions were closed because they weren't a sufficient budget to support the position for one more year. Later on, I got to know that another position, they changed manager, and the new manager is not like a nice person, let us put it that way, So little by little, I start hearing news about the people that was hired for these positions, like it wasn't the great thing that I thought it was. So basically, when God says no to you, it's like, as you say, the good parent protecting you for harm.
Exactly.
And I got a new position, and he said yes.
Yeah, that's a good story. I want to pose another question, similar but different. If you can think about a time that you were around someone when you were not feeling well, but being in their presence just shifted the energy for you, because that's a prayer. Being in the presence of another person, you go to them and you're not feeling well, and that just through their own love and kindness, you just feel better. I'm going to share, although very brief, and forgive me for the sharing. It's a few years ago, and I was really in a bad way, and I was visiting a good friend of mine, Isabella. And I was in a really bad state emotionally, really, really bad, probably worse or off than I wanted to admit at the time. And I remember going into one of the kids' bedrooms at the time, and her response to me was as if it were like this peace that came over me. And I don't remember the exact words that she said, but it was just so sincere. And probably if you ask her, she'd be like, oh, okay, she'll laugh it off. Like, oh my gosh, she's so dramatic. But it really was something so kind and genuine that it was a prayer. You know, that moment I could not connect with my creator for the life of me. I could not connect with my guardian angel, with I could not. There was like a block. So I'm looking and I'm curious to know, have any of you have ever had that experience? Because that is a form of prayer too, that others are imparting to us. So I'll open the floor if anyone is brave enough. No, it's okay. Joni, go ahead.
Yeah, I think, as you said the other day, God makes his miracles using the people around. And I had numerous times, like you go to a house just to give something that your mother told you to go to that house to return something the person left there, and you go there and the person kisses you and hugs you and say, oh, I was missing you. How have you been? And then you start to say one or two words, and then that becomes like an enlightened conversation. You said, I just came here to give her umbrella back, and that becomes a miracle. So I think, in how many people that you just saw one time, the person went to my house because she fixed curtains or something. And my mother said, well, you pass in front of the house every day. Why can't you just, okay, I'm going to drop the umbrella then. And, it's just, I said, my God, and how many times you go to a place that you don't even think about before you're leaving. Sometimes you enter a store and the person that go show you a piece of clothes that you just think it's interesting to buy, and you start a conversation, and the person says, oh my God, do you live around? You're so nice. Where do you live? What do you do for a living? And I said, my God, look at this. And I think that's why you need to be receptive, and you need to be in synchrony with the good, that you are about to receive. I think the negativism of some people don't allow them to see good stuff, only the bad, only the imperfection, only the problems, only, oh, I know it was not going to work. And there you go. So I think when you are open for the best comes to you. It's sometimes a conversation and you find a job. And if you, something that I learned currently is, if a door is closed, it's because that doesn't really have to open to you. That's not a good door, and then you're going to get a better thing. But you have to trust, you have to be in synchrony. You cannot quit. You need to persevere. But, that's personal. So
Exactly. Thank you so much for sharing, Joni. Juliana?
Yeah. Kind of adding to what everybody said, but you mentioned we won't ever really find our answer in prayer. But I feel like if you're in tune with yourself, you might not find it in prayer, but your intuition.
Yep, exactly what it
Almost, I
says.
kind of wanted to add
Exactly
on
what the
that.
text says. Yep.
Yeah, was your intuition. And
Mhm.
yes, it can lead you into the wrong direction, but when you're in tune with yourself and you're in prayer and you're thinking positive, it should never really lead you to the wrong direction. And if it does, that's a lesson, and you end up learning how
Right.
that's a lesson learned. So kind of adding to what she was saying. So
Absolutely. No, I think that was beautifully said, Juliana. Thank you for adding that. And I had an intuition that you were going to say something. I did. No, I really did. I was like, I just saw you. I'm like, Juliana's going to say something. I was like, okay, I was just waiting. okay, God, let me see what's going to happen. And we've heard largely from the females in this group. I'm just curious if any of the males that are here, because in the physical body, well, we know the spirit has no gender, right? In Spiritism, we believe spirit has no gender. But we are in this physical body that does have a gender, and it's always a different experience to have. So I'm curious if any of the 3, 4, 5 men that are here, sorry to count, are here. Have any of you had such an experience that you wanted to share? And it's okay. I mean, if you don't feel, some people are very shy, that's okay. But I just wanted to open up the space that it's okay to share. Not just the women can share. It's okay if anybody else wants to share anything, experience that they've had, or someone that they've known that might not even be your story, but you've heard of something.
No, I just want to share that, for example, in a work environment, I have been working with a very difficult person for the last couple of years, and I decided to start praying for him, and like on a daily basis. And since then, miraculously, we were coming along very well. I don't know if I'm kind of fine-tuning myself to this, but or maybe not allowing this harsh environment to grow in me by doing so, by praying. I think I kind of cut that off, and I opened my heart and my mind, and things are improving. So it's working.
Thank you for sharing that, Vlad. Thank you so much. No one else has, if you want to say something, I don't want you to feel pressure, but please, Leo, if you wanted to share something.
Yeah, I was wanted to share with all the comments that we have.
Oh, all the comments. Oh, so sorry. Okay, please. Let's open up the space for those that are joining us virtually. I wanted to share.
But
so go ahead.
Can we go into
Yes,
that part
yes,
now? Okay,
yes.
got it. Okay. It's a little bit different than, now I have to find another way to to find the comments than what we have done at home. Well, as we usually do, thank you, Kirsten, for bringing this lovely message. We did have quite a bit of friends of ours, Iracema falling from home, Rosalda as well. And can we put that on the screen now? Or we don't have to? The comments?
The comments.
No, read. I will read, but the project on the screen.
Okay. Yep.
Yes. So, and we can, again, just acknowledging, because it's always nice to connect with them. And these obviously are individuals who cannot be here. Rosalda is another state. Iracema couldn't be here today. Good evening, friends. A blessed talk for us. Rosalda also saying, Kirsten, thank you for always bringing light and love to us through these beautiful messages. Yask also saying, beautiful affirmations indeed. So happy to be with all of you, studying how and why to talk to God, I guess. And then we had a comment by Abby when she said, when my dear friend, and I believe, Kirsten, this was when you were talking about prayer in terms of difficult moments, right? When my dear friend was preparing for surgery and my nerves kicked in, I prayed. I prayed with intention and felt immediate comfort as well. So I think it's nice that we brought all those comments and the examples as well. And then Paula comes and says, please elaborate further, quote unquote, open quote, prayer creates the conditions and circumstances for meditation, which projects psyche towards higher spheres.
Definitely. I was going to try to use the whiteboard behind you, but I think it's going to be too much to do that. But,
Yes.
but prayer, explain further. Prayer creates the conditions and circumstances for meditation. Let's address that first. So when we pray, it's as if you can imagine the surface of something. So let's think of the surface of leather. leather that's old, untreated, hasn't been given anything to make it more supple. But once you give leather a conditioner, once you do all this, you follow all the steps on how you're supposed to treat leather, leather becomes very supple, becomes more agile. So our minds are the same way. When we pray, we allow these parts of ourselves to be open. So, and we put ourselves into this meditative state. We're focalizing our thoughts. So by default, I'm putting myself into this meditative state and then allowing myself to connect with this higher power. Joanna puts this in such a beautiful, poetic way. And if I could put it into layman's terms, it would be that we are allowing ourselves through this action of prayer to connect with our higher power. So it's through that us becoming more open, through that act of prayer, becoming more permeable, that we are able to enter to that meditative state that allows us to go even higher. So I hope that answers your question, Paula.
Thank you. And then we have this beautiful comment by Lindalva Walker, when she said, I have prayed during a very challenging time in my life when I had to watch a member of my family suffer unbearable pain. One night I spoke to Jesus. I told him how hard that time had been to us. I told him how I wanted to help, but felt so powerless. So I asked him to help us with it was time for us to receive help. And almost immediately, the person who was going through a very painful flashback received healing and came out of his suffering. And I received a comforting hug I will never forget. Very interesting story as well, right?
Absolutely.
And then Paula comes and asks another question. Curious why there isn't a chapter titled The Resource of Meditation.
Well, the next time I commune with Joanna, I'll ask. But if I had to say respectfully and honestly, Joanna incorporates so much of meditation. And I like to believe that the meditation that Joanna refers to probably is even more evolved, or it's something even perhaps we can't fully grasp yet. Because when we think of meditation, we have our earthly understanding of it. But prayer, meditation, they're brother and sister. They're not the same, but they're brother and sister. So in understanding one, we understand the other. Because there could be some people that say, well, I don't pray, but I meditate. Well, what is prayer? Getting into this mindful state, connecting with our Creator, having a conversation. And that conversation can look different for many different people. So if I could read between the lines, which I don't like to do, Paula, maybe you're saying that Joanna's not giving credence to meditation, but she does in all of her books, in the majority of her books. There's so many of them. The Psychology of Gratitude, Existential Conflicts, obviously the book that we're doing a study on now, where she talks about the benefits of meditation. As a matter of fact, to my knowledge, although I don't really read Portuguese that well, Joanna's works were the first works that I found that actually gave meaning and value to meditation in the Spiritist arena. I'm sure there were in other ones as well, but that was the first one that I found. And so she's asking about this.
Well, one thing that I would like to add too, Kirsten, is just the study of these chapters, especially this one here, in itself is a meditation, right? We can, because we can think that meditation is just a repetitive number of words or phrases, but when you're really connecting under such a topic, it becomes a meditation. That's just something that I would like to add. But thank you for your answer. And yes, Joanna de Angelis has brings amazing values to the world of meditation in Spiritism. And also she mentions, please show the slide again with the 6 to 7 types of prayer. The Spiritism teaches petition, praise, and gratitude for main types of prayer. Wouldn't gratitude be the most inclusive for all circumstances?
So I will say that from a scientific perspective, and I'm not a researcher, I only married one, but the little that I understand from the little schooling that I've had is that in order for what they were searching for in this study, it had to be measurable, and they wanted to differentiate between the different types of prayer. So yes, maybe some of this could be lumped into gratitude, Paula, but I think just for the context of the study, they needed to differentiate between those different things, different types of prayer, if you will. You said, wouldn't gratitude be the most inclusive for all circumstances? It could be if that's the type of prayer that we're doing. But sometimes our prayers to God are, God help me, I don't know what to do. You know, I hope that answers your question, Paula. But you always can reach out to me offline as well.
And then Abby says, beautiful talk, Kirsten. Thank you for all these reminders. We are never alone. Sure, we're not. I'll continue with Paula when she says, others carry us through prayer and loving presence when we can't carry ourselves. Very true. And then one comment here by Irasema saying, nice talk, Kirsten. Thank you so much. And then we can go on. I would like to ask a question, but we'll see at time. Yasko says, hi, dear Kirsten. Great topic. We more often pray more for punctual, conscientious situations like sickness, or for good things that we were granted with. But we don't realize how constantly we are protected or even saved from situations that could have bad or negative consequences. How to enhance this awareness that we should make our existence a state of prayer in this crazy life that we are in?
Fantastic question, Yasko, and thank you for all of you for your comments and questions. That is the $1 million question. How does one become more aware? How do we enhance our self-awareness? Don't worry, I'm going to answer the question, but I just wanted to pose it out there for all of us to think about how you would answer this. I know there's like this funny TikTok. I don't have TikTok anymore, but I know a while ago there was a funny TikTok that went around and people were asking their kids something to the effect of, are you self-aware? And it was like this really funny joke. But we wonder about ourselves and one another. Are we self-aware? And how do we get to that state? So I'm going to answer the question, but I also pose it back to everyone else to think about, and maybe even answer if you feel comfortable. How do you become self-aware? So gratitude is a way, the practice of gratitude, the act of gratitude, and making that an integral part of our lives. And also understanding and realizing that just because something bad that didn't happen to you today doesn't mean that you weren't protected from it. So when we come home from work and, you came home safe, you have all your limbs, kids are okay, driving you nuts, but they're there. Like, thank you, God. We're all here in one piece today. God knows what we were saved from. And there are things, like the story we told about Dione, that we have no idea that we affected somebody in a positive way. The good that we did that day, that how much it helped somebody else. Just something for us to think about. Did you want to add?
You want to say anything? I do, actually. Thank you. No, I think it's important for us to, in terms of gratitude and connecting with what hasn't happened to us. And I think that all of us can recognize limitations that we have, right? And I think if there is one thing that I value today is the limitations that I had in life growing up, right? The things that we couldn't do, right? The things that we wanted to do but perhaps wasn't available, whatever limitations there were. My parents, how difficult my parents were with me, right? Because if I didn't have those limitations, perhaps I wouldn't be here now, right? And I think that, once you start realizing this, which is not easy, and there are a lot of limitations that we have, right? Alba actually mentioned the limitations of not getting that job that you think it's the best job. Guess what? There's a reason for. So I think that is important for all of us to look at these limitations and the things that we couldn't do because perhaps we're being saved from difficult moments, right? And I think that once you realize, then gratitude kicks in. That is that great feeling. Wow. I never thought that it would come that way. So I think this is a great point that you bring. And I think, don't sit down yet. You're not done. Not done. She's getting relaxed here. um, Paula also mentions that Joanna thoroughly values meditation. The simplest definition is prayer is talking to God, and meditation is listening to God. Thanks for your in-depth talk. And then Amaury Santos says, when I do prayer, I can recognize the moment that sometimes I can get real connected to the higher power, with the higher power that I say I can feel. To finalize, if I may ask a question, Kirsten, how can we connect, or is prayer our babe steps to higher mediumship?
Is prayer like baby steps to a higher mediumship? I would say, yeah, in a sense, in a way, because ideally we will reach a state where it's as if we were in constant connection with higher spirituality, with God. Right now, we are still pretty bogged down by a lot of either, just everyday issues that we have going on, fights that we have, whatever it is. We're still, going through this world of trials and tribulations. But this behavior of prayer, opening ourselves up, is in the future, much like we learn in the book Evolution in Two Worlds, when we have those, through the many different, kingdoms, there's this recapitulation that happens again and again and again to reach the point where our cells, we have the autonomic nervous system. So that took millennia of this, repeated behaviors through the different kingdoms. So yeah, we can say that probably now we are in preparation for a way of being that we can't even fathom. And we know that to be true because you might, I know you've done his books, Dr. Miranda, Manuel Filomeno Miranda, a lot of his books, one book in particular, which I cannot remember, he says that there are higher planes where they experience emotions that we do not even fathom yet on earth, positive ones. So that leads me to believe that there are yet ways of being that we are not yet, that we are preparing for. Does that answer your question?
That answers my question. I think this is a good way for us to think about the higher spirituality.
Great question.
How we connected and how we get closer to a world of regeneration, right? Because if we think about it, and we have said this before, on higher planes, there's no need of mediumship in terms of having a medium, because the higher planes comes to those higher planes directly. They have this direct connection, as if we have them on speed dial, right? So it's already there. And I think this is, as you said, is this exercise for us to get there. So this concludes. I don't know if you have any final notes or final.
Nope. Pass it to you.
Thank you so much. We would like then to perhaps give the passes. We can go to the passes and we turn on the music and we can. I'll ask Isabella to bring everyone to the front as well, as we are all